Okay, good morning to you all and welcome to this morning's class. Please, if you can hear me, raise your hand up. If you can hear me, raise your hand up, please. I want to see as many hands up. If you can hear me, raise your hand up. We are only 46 now. I believe the number will go up anyway. Yeah, so I can see about 20 hands up. It's gone to 21. Okay, so those who are not raising their hands up, I believe you can hear me. I hope you can hear me. Okay, so first of all, let me apologize for not being able to meet you yesterday. There was an emergency for me. I thought I would be able to finish whatever I was doing and then meet you at 6:30, but unfortunately, I was not able to do that. So I had to reschedule it to this morning. So please accept my apologies. All right, so let's move on to finish our discussions on perfect competition today and then possibly start with monopoly. I want to make sure that everything is done within this week so that I don't have to do any other class with you. For the examination, I know or I believe that you've all seen the timetable and you are writing this paper on the 4th of June, which happens to be my birthday. Oh, whilst you guys will be struggling on the paper, I would be enjoying myself somewhere. Anyway, so when you finished, I'll invite you for a party. Yeah, so I wish that I complete everything this week, and then for you would have your peace of mind to concentrate on all the papers that you'll be writing. Somebody asked a question about one of the class reps sent me an email about the weighting, not even an email, sorry, a WhatsApp message. It looks like you don't know. So the weighting is going to be 50-50. So the interim assessment that you took would be converted to 50%, and then main exams will also be converted to 50%. So please take note of that. The weighting is 50-50. It's not 80-20, 50-50. Although the interim assessment was over 20, it will be converted to 50%. And the exams too is going to be over 100, but will be converted to 50%. So that is a weighting in terms of the scores or how you are graded. Okay, so let's continue with our discussions on perfect competition. So the last time we met, if my memory serves me right, I I remember I did up to the point where we derived the market supply using the individual firms supply. Right. So today I am going to look at the profit situation for a perfectly competitive firm in the short run. So if you remember the last time we met, I said that in terms of profit, the perfectly competitive firm can be making economic profit, which is also referred to abnormal profit, or it could be making normal profit or a zero economic profit, or it could be making losses. So today we are going to look at these three situations. And then when we are done, we now move into the long run analysis of that industry. Then quickly we move on to monopoly. Right. So let's move on. So I am going to switch to the whiteboard to explain all the three profit situations for a firm in a perfectly competitive market in a short run. Now, please take note of this. I am using diagrams to explain this, but the diagrams should be able to, you should be able to translate the diagrams into figures, right? So you could be given the profit of the firm, and then you could be given tables. translate the diagrams into tables, understand them when you have table. So a table could be given to you where you have the price for the firm, that is the price that has been detected by the industry. And the table include the marginal cost at various units of output, right? And then marginal revenue and all that. And you're asked to find the profit maximizing output for this firm using the table. So what you know is that for a perfectly competitive firm in the short run, the profit maximizing output is the one that equates, or is the one that price is equal to marginal cost. So you just look at the table and see you have the price, and look at where the marginal cost is equal to price. The quantity that ensures that will be the profit maximizing quantity. And from there, you could be asked to find the profit, because you'll be given the average cost, the total average total cost, and all that in the table. So you should be able to translate these diagrams here, the figures here, into tables when you are given tables to do the calculations and all that. So please take note of that. Yeah, so let me switch to the whiteboard to explain the three profit situations for a firm in a perfectly competitive market. So I am switching to the whiteboard. So please, can you see my whiteboard? I believe you can see my whiteboard. Okay, so now in terms of profit situation, there are three. So one is the firm could be making abnormal profit. So I'll call it abnormal profit. And abnormal profit is the same as positive economic profit. So it's making positive economic profit. Right? So that is one. And then the second one is that it could be making a normal profit. So normal profit. Which is the same as zero. We call this the zero economic profit. Zero economic profit. And the last one that is making a loss. Right? So these are the three situations. Now, at what point is the firm making abnormal profit? When the price that has been detected by the industry is greater than the average total cost, then the firm will be making abnormal profit or positive economic profit. For a normal profit, when price is equal to the average total cost, the firm will be making a normal profit or zero economic profit. And then the last one, when price is less than the average total cost, then the firm will be making a loss. Right. So what we are going to do now is that I am going to draw the graphs for each of these three situations. So we want to draw the graph for the situation where the firm is making abnormal profit or positive economic profit. The situation where the firm is making normal profit, and then the situation where the firm is making a loss. So that is what we are going to look at. Okay, so let's first of all start with abnormal profit. And in the slides, we refer to that situation is when you have good time, but it's basically normal profit, abnormal profit, right? So one, I'm looking at where price is greater than the average total cost. That is abnormal profit or positive economic profit. Abnormal or positive economic profit. So that's the situation I'm looking at. So now we are going to combine both the industry and then the firm. So for the industry, the demand is downward sloping. So this is for the industry, downward sloping demand curve. And then we have the supply for the industry. So it is the interaction between demand and supply for the industry that determines the price that each firm is taking as given. So the industry determines the price, and then the firm takes that price as given. So given this price, it will translate into a horizontal demand curve for a firm. So this firm has this horizontal demand curve. So it's for the firm, we know that the price will be equal to the marginal revenue and at the same time equal to the average revenue for the firm. Okay. So this is industry or market. So this is, I can call this is for the market. This is the market equilibrium. And this is for the firm. Okay. So now I am going to draw the cost curves such that we will see that at the profit maximizing equilibrium or output, the price that has been dictated by the industry would be greater than the average total cost at that particular output. Somebody says he cannot hear me. Please, can you hear me? Someone says he can't hear me. Is that all? Does it go for all of you or just that person? Hello, if you can hear me, raise your hand up. Okay, so the person who says you can't hear me, I think it's your internet because majority can hear me. Yeah, so now like I was saying, we are going to draw the graph. No, I'm going to impose the cost curves such that at the profit maximizing output, the price would be greater than the average total cost. Right? So how do I do it? So in that sense, this is my average total cost curve. And then you know that the marginal cost passes through the minimum of the average total cost curve. So this is it. So now I'm looking for where, you know that equilibrium is where price is equal to marginal cost. So you look for where the price line cuts the marginal cost line, and it is here. So you trace it down. So this will be the quantity that the firm have to sell in order to maximize the profit. And the price at that quantity is this one. So let's look for the average total cost at that particular quantity. And it is where this line cuts the average total cost line. So you can trace it this way so that this will give you your average total cost at the profit maximizing quantity or output. So therefore, the difference between the price and then average total cost is the profit margin. So this is how much for every unit of output you are making a profit of the difference between price and then their average total cost. So for every unit of output, that is the profit you are making, right? So the profit is, and that is what we call the profit margin, the difference between your price and your average total cost is your profit margin. So if you want to find your total profit, so your total profit will be equal to, so your total profit will be equal to the margin, which is price minus your average total cost times the quantity that is sold. So that will be your total profit. So for each output sold, your profit is the difference between price and average cost. So if I want to find the whole profit, which is the whole of this, the area of the shaded region, then it is the price minus average total cost multiplied by the quantity sold. So this is the case where the firm is making abnormal profit. So the difference here, the profit here is what we call the positive economic profit, right? It is making a positive economic profit. Okay. So the profit margin again is the difference between price and the average total cost. That gives you the profit margin. And if you want to find the total profit, then it is the margin multiplied by the quantities that is sold. That gives you the margin. Right? Okay. So this is the case for abnormal profit. Now let's look at the case for a normal profit. So the case for a normal profit or zero economic profit. So for a normal profit or zero economic profit. Right? Okay. So again, we have to draw the industry equilibrium or the market equilibrium that will dictate the price that each firm will sell the commodity at. So we have the demand curve for the industry and then the supply curve for the industry. So this would dictate the price, and it is the price that each firm is going to sell at, and that will determine the demand curve for a firm. So this price will tell the demand curve. So here we have price is equal to marginal revenue for the firm and at the same time equal to the average revenue, right? So this is the price in the industry. So this is the market. This is for the market. And then this is for a firm in the industry, right? So this is the total output for all firms in the industry. And then we want to determine the output for a particular firm in the industry. So in the case of normal profit, we know that price is equal to the average total cost, the case for normal profit. So I have to draw my diagram or I have to impose the cost on the firm's diagram such that at the equilibrium where price is equal to marginal cost, price is also equal to the average total cost. And to draw that, all I need to do is I need to have a average total cost like that. So this is the average total cost for the firm. and then I have my marginal cost curve passing through the minimum. So therefore, the equilibrium point is here, that this is what this firm will supply. And then what do you see? You see that at that equilibrium, price is equal to the average total cost. So this is what will give us a zero economic profit, so or normal profit. So in this case, this firm is making normal profit or breaking even. That's another name you can call it, break even. So the firm breaks even here. So it breaks even at this point. And the break even is when price is equal to average total cost. Right? So please take note of this. So this is the case for the normal profit. Now let's look at the last one, which is the case for a loss. I guess by now you probably have an idea of how that graph is going to look like. But let's just confirm that. So the case for a loss, so for a loss, price is less than the average total cost for a loss. So again, I draw the industry equilibrium. Okay, so I have this as the industry's equilibrium. And then let's get the firm's equilibrium. So this price will translate here. So that we have price is equal to marginal revenue and at the same time equal to average revenue. Good. So now I am going to draw or impose the cost curve such that at the profit maximizing output, price will be less than the average total cost. So in that sense, the average total cost should be above the price line. So this is my average total cost curve. And then my marginal cost should pass through the minimum of the average total cost. So this is my marginal cost. So now let's look at the profit maximizing equilibrium. So now let's look at where the marginal cost line cuts the price line. So that's the equilibrium point. So it happens here. So if you trace this one down, this will give you the profit maximizing output for the firm. But at that output, this firm is making a loss. So you see that the average total cost is above the price that has been detected by the industry. So the firm will be making a loss in this case. Okay, good. So these are the diagrammatic explanation of all the three profit situations of a firm in a perfectly competitive market. Good. So now let's move on to the long run. Now note that these three situations is a short run analysis. So in the short run, a perfectly competitive firm can be making abnormal profit. It can be making a normal profit, or it could even make losses. If you remember the last time we discussed it, we said that there are situations where it can make loss and still stay in business as long as price is greater than the average or price is greater than the minimum of the average variable cost, then the firm can stay in business. So we could have a situation where losses are being made, but firms stay. Okay, so this is a short run analysis. Now let's go into the long run, right? So the long run, as you already know, there are no fixed inputs. All inputs are variable, right? All inputs are variable. And therefore, in the long run, if you make a loss, you exit the market. So we are looking at long run analysis. So long run, we know that in the long run, all inputs are variable inputs, right? So all inputs are variable in the long run. They are variable in the long run, right? So therefore, the firm exits the market, in fact, permanently, when price is less than the average total cost. So here, there's nothing like the firm checking whether the price is greater than the average variable cost or not. There are no fixed costs in the long run. So if you are not covering your average variable cost, you just leave. In fact, there's a permanent um, exit. You leave the market. You are not shutting down and then temporarily and then hold on and come back. Right? So this is something that you should know. The shutdown point in the long run, firms exit the market. So therefore, what is the long run equilibrium? In the long run, in a perfect competition, all firms make normal profit. All firms make normal profit in the long run. So they make normal profit in the long run. All firms in the industry make normal profit in the long run. Right? So if we have a market, a perfectly competitive market, and then the market gets to a point where all firms in that market are making normal profit, then that market is said to be in the long run equilibrium. So this is what I'm saying, that in the long run, this is what is going to happen. Let's use diagram to show that. So in the long run, so this is the industry equilibrium. This is the industry's equilibrium. So we have this as the industry's equilibrium. And then we have this as a firm, a representative firm's equilibrium. So this is the price that is detected by the industry. So this will be equal to the marginal revenue and at the same time equal to the average revenue. So in the long run, this is what is going to happen. And then this passes through the marginal cost curve, passes through the minimum of the average total cost. So this is what happens in the long run. So here you see that in the long run, price is equal to marginal cost and at the same time equal to the average total cost. So in the long run, so this is the long run equilibrium for the firm. So this is the long run equilibrium for the firm. So please take note of that in the long run, all firms make normal profit. Right? All firms make normal profit in the long run. In other words, in the long run, price is equal to long run marginal cost and also equal to the long run average total cost. right? So all firms make normal profit in the long run. Now the question is, what drives an industry from the short run equilibrium to this long run equilibrium? Or in other words, what pushes the firm to a long run equilibrium? And the answer is entry and exit. So it is the effect of entry and exit that pushes firms into the long run equilibrium. And I'm going to explain that. Okay? So it is this entry and exit that pushes the industry into the long run equilibrium. So now let's explain how that happens. And I'm going to explain that with a situation where firms in the industry are making abnormal profit, right? So I'm going to use the short run situation will be where firms are making abnormal profit. So let's draw that diagram. So this is our industry or the market equilibrium. So this is the demand for the industry and this is the supply for the industry. So this is the industry's output. So for industry, I, and then this is the price that has been detected by the industry. And it is this price that this firm is going to use to sell or will sell each of their commodities at. But here we are assuming that the firms are making abnormal profit. So their MC or ATC is below. So you have this as the MC. Now let's look for where the MC line cuts the price line. So this is MC equal to marginal revenue. So we look for where the MC line cuts the price line, and it happens here. So you trace it down. So this will be the equilibrium or the output that maximizes profit for the firm. And then this will be our average total cost. So this firm is making abnormal profit. So we want to see how this situation will push the firm into the long run equilibrium. Note that one of the characteristics of a perfectly competitive market is that there's free entry and exit in the market. There's free entry and exit in the market. So there are potential entrants who are watching this market and then they see that, oh, wow, firms in the market, that is the existing firms in the market, are making abnormal profit. So it means that they are getting higher returns for their investment or resources that they push into that industry. Now, since there's free entry and exit, if you want to enter the industry, there are no impediment. We will see that the potential entrants will start entering the industry. So they will also move their resources and then enter the industry. Now, what is the implication? When they enter the industry, that is going to increase the industry supply. So you see that the industry supply curve would increase to X1. Now, with an increase in industry supply curve, you see that the price dictated by the industry will fall, right? So that gives us a new price in the industry. Now you can trace this price again. So this firm here will now produce at where the new price cuts that line. So it will be here. That might be lower. Now, if you trace it, you see that there will be a reduction in profit for that particular firm and for all firms. Still, there's still abnormal profit. More firms will enter the industry. So this process is going to continue up to the point where price will now be equal to the minimum of the average total cost. So the market supply would have shifted to the right such that price will fall where it will now be equal to the minimum of the average total cost. Now, if it is equal to the minimum of the average total cost, there is no more abnormal profit being made by firms in the industry. So the entry into the industry will stop. At that point, it is said that firms are in the long run equilibrium. So the entry into the industry will stop. And at that point, the industry will be in the long run equilibrium. Let me take it again. So we are saying that what pushes the firm or the industry into the long run equilibrium, it is the entry and exit. That free entry and exit characteristics of pepper competition. So it's entry and exit. All right? Characteristics of pepper competition. So I am saying that we are starting with a situation where firms make abnormal profit. So firms are making abnormal profit, right? They are making abnormal profit. And let's see the process that leads to long run equilibrium. So I will start with the industry. I'll draw the industry equilibrium. So this is the demand curve for the industry, and this is the supply curve for the industry. So let's get the price that is detected or that has been detected by the industry. And then this is the quantity. So now let's get the firm's equilibrium. Note that the firm is making abnormal profit, right? So this is the price that has been detected by the industry. So this is the price. So price should be equal to marginal revenue and at the same time equal to average revenue, right? Okay. So this firm is making abnormal profit. So this is your average total cost. And then our marginal cost curve should pass through the minimum of the average total cost. So let's look at, so this is where this firm, this is the quantity that this firm would have to sell in order to maximize profit. And the profit that this firm will be earning, the profit that this firm will be earning will be this region. So this is the abnormal profit. Okay. So now I'm saying that there is free entry and exit. So there are potential entrants or potential firms who are not in the business yet, but they have the resources. So once they see that existing firms are making abnormal profit, they are incentivized to enter the industry. So they are motivated to enter. So in fact, they actually enter the industry. Now, when they enter the industry, what is the effect of the entrance? Is to increase the industry supply because the new firms have come in and they are supplying more. So the industry supply would increase, right? So with an increase in the industry supply, you see that the equilibrium price in the industry will fall. Now, with a fall in equilibrium price, that creates a new demand curve for a typical firm in the industry. So this will be the new demand curve. And then with that new demand curve, let's look at the output that will maximize the firm's profit. it is where the new demand curve cuts the old marginal cost line, which is this. So you trace it down, and then you see that the profit margin would have what reduced as a result of the increase. Although the profit margin has reduced, there is still abnormal profit because price will still be greater than the average total cost. So this process is going to continue until the point where price is equal to the minimum of the average total cost. And if that is the case, there is no incentive for existing firms, the potential firms to enter the industry anymore. And if that happens, we have what we call the long run equilibrium. So this process will continue up to the point where now price will be equal to the minimum. So I can just trace it. Sorry, my lines are crooked. And just draw the supply curve to pass through that line. So this will be our final supply curve. And then therefore, this gives us our final price. And what you see that is that all firms will be making normal profit in the long run. So that is the long run situation. How we move into the long run situation when there is either abnormal profit. I mean, in this case, when there's abnormal profit. Now let's look at the reverse. When there are losses, when firms are making losses, how do the industry move into a long run situation? So let's say when some firms are making losses in the industry. So let me clear this and then draw the situation for a loss. So again, we draw our industry equilibrium, and then we also need our firm equilibrium. So this is the industry's demand curve, and then this is also the industry supply curve. So you trace it down, and then you trace this one here. So this is the price that has been detected, and this is the industry's output, right? So the detected price is what the firm will use. So for the firm, price is equal to marginal revenue, and at the same time equal to the average revenue. Now we are looking at the case for a loss. So this is your average total cost curve, and then the marginal cost line passes through the minimum here, right? So therefore, let's look for where the marginal cost line cuts the price line, and that is here. So you trace it down. So this is the profit maximizing output for the firm, but the firm is making a loss of that region. So this is price, and then this is the average total cost that the firm is. I mean the average total cost at the profit maximizing output. So this loss is being made. Now let's see what is going to happen in the industry. Now firms that are making losses are going to exit, particularly those who are not covering their average variable cost are going to exit the market, right? Because there's free entry and exit. Now when they exit, what is happening? As they leave the market, the supply in the industry reduces because some firms are leaving. So supply in the industry reduces. When supply reduces, the supply curve will shift upward. Now by shifting upward, there is an adjustment in price. So price increases a little bit, and that will mean that the losses for each firm is cut, particularly those who stay. So those who stay in the industry will see a reduction in the loss that they are making. This process is going to continue, like I said, until the point where now the all firms make normal profit. So this supply would shift to the left such that all firms make normal profit. And if that happens, then we are again in the long run equilibrium. So that's the process. So if you look at the slice, this is what the slice is trying to explain to you, right? That it is the entry and exit that will lead to the, or that will spark the adjustment to the long run equilibrium. And I've explained that if the short run situation is that firms are making abnormal profit, then new firms will enter the industry and that will drive down prices up to the point where firms will now make normal profit. All firms will be making normal profit. And that will be the long run equilibrium. Now, if it starts with losses, then exits, firms will exit. And whilst they are exiting, price will be adjusted upward. There will be an upward adjustment in prices as the firms are exiting the industry. And when that happens, price will keep on going up to the point where there is no incentive for existing firms to exit. And that only happens when now all firms are making normal profit. So basically, that's the long run situation, right? Basically, that's the long run situation. Now, the last thing I want to do here is to look at when there are disturbances in the industry. Okay, right? So let's say that we are in a long run situation. Or let me make a point that anytime the industry deviates from the long run situation, it will work itself back. So if you remember, we said that the free market situation, right? The free market system, right? Anytime there is deviations in equilibrium, the free market works itself back into equilibrium. So the same way in a perfect competitive market, when the market deviates from the long run situation, that is, it moves into a short run situation, the market works itself back to the long run over time. So let's look at how this happens. It is very similar to what we have just explained. When there are deviations in the market or there are shocks in the market, how does this market work itself back to equilibrium? So again, let's draw a long run situation for a firm in this industry. So I want a long run situation or a long run equilibrium. So this is the demand curve for the industry, and this is the supply curve for the industry. So we have price here, and then we have quantity here, right? So let's get it for the firm. Okay, so again, the firm will pick the price that has been detected by the industry. Marginal revenue equal to marginal cost. Sorry, average revenue, not marginal cost, average revenue. So this is a long run equilibrium. So I want to draw it. I want a long run equilibrium. So this is a long run equilibrium, right? So this is the MC. And then this is the ATC, right? So this is will be what the firm will be producing. Okay. So now let's see that there's a shock in the market. And the shock can come from either the demand side or the supply side. So let's pick a shock from the demand side. So let's say that the income of consumers has increased and then the good is a normal good. So with an increase in the income of consumers and the good being a normal good, you know that this is going to shift the demand curve to the right. So this gives us our demand curve to the right. Now that is going to lead to a new price in the industry. So this is the new price. in the industry. So it means that with this new price, the firm now will be making abnormal profit. So that brings us to a short run equilibrium. So let's look. So this is with this new price, the marginal cost will be equal to price at this point. So now this will be the quantity that this firm is going to produce and then make a profit of abnormal profit of this size, right? It's going to make abnormal profit of this size. Now, once there is abnormal profit, then what we discussed earlier will set in. As long as there's abnormal profit, the discussion we did, when there's no abnormal profit, how does the firm or how does the industry moves into equilibrium? So once there is abnormal profit, the discussions or the adjustments that we discussed earlier will set in. So it means that potential entrants will enter the industry, and when they enter, you see that supply will shift to the right, and with a shift in supply to the right, prices will start falling, and then this process is going to continue until when we get back to equilibrium, right? So until we've gotten back to the equilibrium we get back to the long run equilibrium again. Now, there is some assumptions here that I made, but I want to, not touch on it, right? So it has to do with whether the industry is a constant cost industry, increasing cost industry, or a decreasing cost industry. But I'm not going to go into that with you. But what I want you to know here is that anytime there's a disturbance, if there's a long run equilibrium and there's a shock in the industry, right? Of course, some firms will be making abnormal profits, some will be making losses, depending on the shock. Equilibrium or long run equilibrium would be restored over time using or through the adjustment that I have just discussed with you. Okay, so let's look at the situation where the shock is a negative shock. Sorry. The shock is a negative shock. So assuming we have a negative shock, right? So assuming we have a negative shock. So we have the demand that way, and then we also have our supply that way. So the price detected by the industry is this. So it's the same price that the firm. So we assume that they are in the long run equilibrium, or this firm is in the long run equilibrium. So your average total cost here, and then your marginal cost will pass through the minimum of that, and then you trace it down. Okay, so this is the equilibrium, long run equilibrium situation. So now let's assume that there is a demand shock. There is a demand shock. Now this demand shock is a negative one. So we will see that the demand curve will shift to the left, a downward shift. Now when it shifts to the left, you look at where the new demand curve cuts the old supply curve, which is here, and that will give us a new price. And that price will be below the average total cost. So there will be a loss, right? So there will be a loss of this region. Price is here, and this is the average total cost, right? Now with this loss, some firms are going to exit the market, just as we discussed. Now as they exit, supply curve will shift to the left, and that will cause upward adjustment in prices. So as prices adjust upward, the losses are reduced. So this will continue up to the point where all losses have been cleared, and only happens when now the industry or the firm returns to the long run equilibrium. So this is what happens when there are shocks, right? Okay. So let's get back to the slides. I think I've covered most of the things I want to cover, but let's just get back to the slides now. So these are the things I was discussing with you earlier. So um, we look at the bad times and the long times and all that. So let me go back. So this is the ones I started with. Okay, so the profit margin. So in normal times where they make zero economic profit, this is the diagram. So it's just too many slides, but it's just the same very simple thing that he's discussing. So this is where they make economic profit. And then let's look at the good times, abnormal times, or abnormal profit. So this is also the diagram for abnormal profit. The diagram I've already drawn for you. And then let's look at the diagram for the loss. So this is the diagram for a loss. I've already drawn that for you as well, right? So the long run equilibrium, I've explained that too, that in the long run, they all make normal profit or they make zero economic profit in the long run. I've explained that as well. And then you can go on to see how the long run equilibrium is achieved. So the supply curves either shifts to the right or left, depending on what is happening in the short run. What if it is abnormal profit, then the supply curve will shift to the right. And if it is losses, the supply curve will shift to the left. So if you take the slides, all these things are there, right? So the arrows indicates, and then the entry and exit conditions that I mentioned. So you can read that as well. So the entry and exit is what pushes the industry into the long run equilibrium. And then you can look at the effect of a demand shock and how that leads to the long run equilibrium. This is also there. I've explained all this to you based on the using the whiteboard. So all these things have been explained, right? Okay. So all these things have been explained. So the changes in demand is what I've explained to you, right? So now I would want to skip this, but all I want to tell you is that of all the three or four them or of all the four markets, the most efficient one is perfect competition, right? So for those who want to go and read more on that, you can go and find out why perfect competition is the most efficient market, right? So you can read on that. So I'll skip that about whether perfect competition is fair or not. Okay. So now let's go into monopoly. So again, I'm going to explain this not using the slides. I can use the whiteboard to explain it and we can be faster about that. So we know what the monopoly market is, right? So from our discussions earlier, we know that it's a market that is characterized by just a single seller, but many buyers of the commodity. The product is unique, it is not differentiated, and the firm has control over price of the items that it sells. There is high barrier to entry. You know, it's not easy for other firms to enter easily. So, and it is these barriers that lead to the barriers that serves as the source of the monopoly, right? So, like I said, monopoly is a price maker. It's not a price taker. It has control over the price. The product sold in the market is unique, right, up to the firm. Now, what are the sources of the monopoly power? So the sources are what you see here. So it could be as a result of ownership of a strategic resources or a key resources. So the reason why a firm can become a monopoly is that probably that firm is the only firm with the resources that are needed to produce the products. So for that reason, that firm become a monopolist, right? So ownership of a strategic resources can lead to a firm becoming a monopolist. And then there's also situations where the monopoly power is actually granted by government. So, like for instance, if you look at the case for ECG in Ghana, their source of monopoly power is from the government. So they have the sole, I mean, so they are the sole firm that government has granted power to sell electricity. So ECG becomes a monopoly. So yes, so government provision of that power can lead to a firm becoming a monopolist. There's also a situation where the cost of production, it's easier for us to have one firm producing the product than to have two firms or more firms as a result of the cost of production. So it might be cheaper for one firm producing it than having more firms producing it. And that can also lead to a monopoly situation because that can also lead to a monopoly situation. Please take note of these sources of barriers or sources of monopoly. You can be asked in the exams that discuss the or state or briefly explain two or three sources of barriers to entry or sources of monopoly power, right? And you should be able to provide an answer to that when you're asked to do that. So ownership of key or strategic resources, government giving a single firm the exclusive right to produce some goods. And sometimes you can even look at it in terms of cost of production being more efficient when one firm produces it than two or large number of firms producing it, right? So those are the sources of um, monopoly. So, like I said, monopoly resources. So government created monopolies. As example is the ECG example. But how does government create it? It can create it through patents and then copyright laws and granting them the sole producer for a particular commodity. So that can be that. So now, if you comparing monopoly to perfect competition, I believe you can do that, right? So in the case of a monopoly, there's just a sole producer, and then one difference is that the monopoly faces the entire market demand curve, and therefore, for the monopolies, the demand curve is downward sloping. It is not horizontal, as in the case of perfect competition. So for the monopolist, the demand curve is downward sloping and not horizontal. And I'll explain that further. The monopolist is a price maker, he's not a price taker. And therefore, to sell more output, the monopolist reduces price to sell more because the demand curve is downward sloping, right? It sells more to, to sell more, it has to reduce price. So for competitive firm, so there are many producers, the demand curve is horizontal, the firm is a price taker, and it can sell as much as it can at the same price. Okay. So now this is still explaining the relationship between the demand curve for a monopolist and then a perfect competitive firm. So the monopolist has a downward sloping demand curve, and a perfect competitive firm has a horizontal demand curve. Okay, so now let's look at the the total revenue and average revenue and the marginal revenue for the monopolist. Now for the monopolist, of course, just like the perfect competition, their total revenue is the price times the quantity. So total revenue is the price times quantity. And again, the average revenue is their total revenue divided by quantity. That gives you the average revenue, which will be equal to price, which will be equal to price. Their marginal revenue, again, will be change in total revenue divided by change in quantity, and that gives you marginal revenue. However, for the monopolist, the marginal revenue is lower than price. Please take note of this. This is very important. For the monopolist, marginal revenue is lower than price. So let me just switch to the whiteboard to explain this. So we have seen that their total revenue again is price times quantity, or quantity times price. And their average revenue is the total revenue divided by quantity. And we can show that that is equal to price. And the marginal revenue again is change in total revenue divided by the change in quantity, which is marginal revenue. But unlike perfect competition, where price is equal to equal to average revenue and equal to marginal revenue, right? Perfect competition. For the monopolist, price is equal to average revenue, but it is greater than the marginal revenue. For the monopolist, please take note of that. So for the monopolist, price is equal to average revenue, but it is greater than the marginal revenue for the monopolist. Please take note of this. Therefore, in terms of diagram, for the monopolist, the marginal revenue curve lies below the average revenue or the price line. So if this is the demand curve, which is the same as the price, and then the average revenue, the marginal revenue lies below it. So this will be the marginal revenue curve for the monopolist. So please take note of this. Take note of this. All right? Okay. So now, given this, let's look for the profit maximizing output for the monopolist. So just as we did in the case for perfect competition, we want to do the same for the monopolist. So let's find the profit maximizing output for the monopolist. Right? Let's find that. Okay. So now let me clear this. So from our discussion so far, we know that the profit maximizing output, or the theory of thinking at the margin, decisions are made at the margin, right? So with decisions made at the margin, it means that the marginal benefits will be equal to marginal cost. The same thing happens to applies to the monopolist. So therefore, for the monopolist, the profit maximizing output is the one that equates marginal revenue to marginal cost for the monopolist. Now, in the case of perfect competition, note that this was the same equilibrium condition, but for perfect competition, because marginal revenue is equal to price, we restated the condition as price being equal to marginal cost. But for the monopolist, we cannot say that because price is not equal to marginal revenue for the monopolist. So therefore, for the monopolist, the profit maximizing condition is marginal revenue should be equal to marginal cost. So let's get that on a diagram. So the demand curve for the monopolist is downward sloping because it faces the entire market demand. And also the marginal revenue curve lies below the demand curve. So this is the demand curve is the same as the price line and then the same as the average revenue line. So for the monopolist, the marginal revenue lies below the demand curve. So therefore, the marginal revenue is lower than the price. So now let's impose the marginal cost. So you include the marginal cost here. I've seen a hand up, I'll come to it, please. So this is the marginal cost curve. So now let's look for where the marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost, and that happens here, right? So if you trace this one down, this will be the quantity that this monopolist would have to sell in order to maximize profit. And to obtain the price that this monopolist would charge, just trace the line up again to touch the demand curve, and that will give you the price this monopolist will charge. So this is the profit maximizing condition for the monopolist. So the monopolist, it is when marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. Okay, so I've seen the hand up. Let me go to the person. The person has lowered their hand. If you can raise it again, I will unmute you, then you ask your question. Okay, so the hand is not coming up again. Oh. All right. So like I was saying, this is the diagram for the monopolist. So the reason, so let me take it again. Let me take the diagram again. So let's draw the profit situation, the monopoly. Let's find the, so this is the demand curve for the monopoly. And then this is the marginal revenue curve for the monopoly. Now the demand curve is the same as the price and then the same as the average revenue, right? Now let's see, we are now going to impose the marginal cost. So the marginal cost is the same. I impose the marginal cost here. And therefore you look for the equilibrium is where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. So you look for it here. So this is where it happens. So you trace it down. So this will give you the quantity that this monopoly would produce. And to determine the price that this monopoly will charge, just trace it up to touch the demand curve and trace it this way. That will be the price that this monopolist will charge. Okay. Now, we don't know whether this monopoly is making abnormal profit, a normal profit, or a loss. I will indicate that soon. But let me see. I've seen some 2 messages, and okay, all right. So okay, somebody is asking for exams case whether you be given a diagram to extract. So for exams, the likely approach will be, I don't want to we probably don't want to burden you too much. We'll give you a table, and the table will have the figures. So all you need to understand are the conditions, the profit maximizing conditions. So you look at the table and see where the marginal revenue is equal to the marginal cost in the table. The output that corresponds to that will be the profit maximizing output. The table will also contain the average cost, it will contain average variable cost, and all other information that you need. So you use this information to find the profit maximizing output. You could be asked to find a profit and all. I'll do an example with you. I mean, let's see, what is the time now? Okay, so I still have more time. We are going up to 12. So when I'm able to complete Monopoly, I'll take an example with you. And then you see how it's going to look like in case you are to get these kind of things in exams. Right? Okay. So somebody asked a question, does it mean the marginal cost line should always divide the marginal revenue? Oh, no, no, not necessarily equally. No. You just have to draw the marginal cost curve. But there's something I'm going to indicate to you. I mean, it should not necessarily divide it into two. I could have even taken this one up here. It just depends on how the firm marginal cost is. So that equilibrium would have happened here. Right? I just draw it to make it nicer. That is why I put it into two, but not necessarily dividing it into two. It could have gone up here. But what it will not do, so let me just explain it to you here, is that where it will not cut. So let me draw it. Let me draw this diagram again. Okay, so this is our demand curve. Oh no, let me draw it again. So this is the demand curve, and this is the marginal revenue curve. So this is where marginal revenue is 0. Note that. So here MR is 0. And you can trace it up here. Okay. So in terms of elasticity, I don't know if this was told. If you pick a demand curve, elasticity varies along the demand curve, right? It varies along the demand curve. So here it is unitary, right? It is unitary. And then here is elastic. This region is elastic, right? And there is inelastic. So I'm not sure if I'm getting this thing right. So okay, so let me see. I'm coming. Hold on. Yeah, I think so. Here it is is greater than 1 up here. So here greater than 1, and then here is less than 1. Right? So in the high price region, when you change price, consumers respond more to changes in prices. And then in the low price, they respond less to changes in prices. Now, this is what I'm saying. This is what is going to happen. The person who asked the question, the marginal cost. So for the monopolist, equilibrium will never happen here in the elastic region, because in the elastic region you see that the what do you call it? The marginal revenue goes into 0, right? The marginal revenue is even negative. So therefore, equilibrium will not happen in the elastic region. Hold on, let me just confirm this. I want to check something. Hold on. Hold on, I'm coming. I want to check something first. Okay, so um, so let me come back. So the diagrams are exactly the same. So let me share my whiteboard with you. Yeah. So like I was saying, equilibrium will always take place in this region here. So this is where it will happen, the elastic region. And the reason why it will happen in the elastic region is that in the inelastic region, what do you call it? Marginal revenue is zero, or even it goes into negative, right? So therefore, the monopolist will not produce here. The equilibrium will not take place here, right? It will only take place in this region. So please, when you are drawing the diagram for a monopoly, the equilibrium for a monopoly, it should not be here, right? It should always be within this, inside the elastic region of the demand curve. So let me explain that. Let me draw that again. So this is price. So this is the demand curve. Oh, sorry, terrible demand curve. Okay, so this is the demand curve, D here, and then this is the marginal revenue. So what I'm saying is that if you draw this straight line here, you can just put it in your mind. The equilibrium should always be within this region. It cannot be here, right? Because here, marginal revenue is negative, right? So it can't be in that region. So please take note of that, right? You could be asked to explain this, that explain why the monopolist will not, what do you call it, sell or produce and sell in the inelastic region, but it will always sell in the elastic region, right? And the reason is that marginal revenue in the inelastic region is negative. So the monopolies will not do that. Okay? All right. Now let's impose a cost function. Of course, one would say that it will not make sense for a monopolist to make losses because you are the one who have control over price. You control price. So why would you make loss if the price that you are selling your item is such that you are unable to cover your average cost? Then you increase it. So some people will argue that the monopolists always make abnormal profit. So if I trace it up, this will be the price. So I can impose the average total cost for the monopolist. And then you see that this is where the average total cost is. So the profit that this monopolist will make will be this gap here. Yeah. So it wouldn't make sense for a monopolist to make a loss. It wouldn't make sense at all. Okay. Good. So these are the things I want you to take away from here. So one, you should be able to identify the profit maximizing output. Assuming you have figures in a table, know that it is where MR equal to MC. Okay. You should also be able to tell whether the monopolist is making profit. So profit is when the price is greater than the average total cost. And then the profit margin will be the difference, right? You should be able to tell this, right? And the total profit will be the difference times the cost. Okay, you should be able to do this as well, right? Okay, let me go back to the slides and see what I haven't covered. Then I can, So let me unshare this. Let me share the slides. Okay, so I've done. So this is an exam. So this is the sort of things that I was talking of that you could be given in exams, right? So you have a monopolist, for instance. So in this case, it's possible we can calculate the average revenue for you or the marginal revenue for you. So even if it's not calculated for you, you have to fill the table. And once you fill the table, you can now decide at where price is equal to the marginal cost, right? So this is to tell you that price will be greater than the marginal revenue. If you look at it, you see that price is greater than marginal revenue, but price is equal to the average revenue. They are the same, right? So assuming that this had a marginal cost schedule in addition, then you just have to look for where price is equal to the marginal cost, and that will give you, sorry, where marginal revenue. So for in the case of the monopolies, is marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. So you look for where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost, and then that output will be the profit maximizing output. Now, once you identify that, you can now find all the other things that you could be doing, you could ask to do. So the monopoly's marginal revenue is always less than price, as I've already said. Reason, it needs to reduce its price if it wants to sell more and all that. So this is the diagram that I've already explained to you. Marginal revenue is less than marginal average revenue is greater than marginal revenue, or price is greater than marginal revenue and all that. Okay. So somebody is asking whether only one type of profit. So yes, so well, somebody, I don't know. In the case of um a loss, in fact, reality, practically, it doesn't make sense to have a monopolist making a loss. If the monopolist is making a loss, then he has to exit the market. There's no point, right? But well, we can probably have some monopolies that are making normal profit, right? That again, to someone will say it's make, but it can happen where the price that the monopolist is charging is exactly equal to the the average total cost. So let me just draw that and let you see. We can have that in principle. In principle, we can have that situation. Okay, so let's get this. Okay. Okay, so this is that, and then let's say, so this is where um, Q is the profit maximized. So if you trace it up, that means I have to draw my marginal, sorry, the average cost curve that way. So you see that here the price P will be equal to the average total cost. Okay, but I mean, one will say that this is not something that will happen. The monopolists will always want to make profit. So if prices are lower than its average cost, average variable cost, or average total cost, it would increase it. Okay. Now somebody has written there about ECG. Okay, so the case of ECG is peculiar. ECG is not the one that fixed the price. You know that Kofi Ima. So in Ghana, the reason why ECG make losses is that ECG is not the one that we have a public, a regulatory institution or body that actually determines the price for ECG. That is why. But if ECG were to allow to fix its own price, then ECG would not be where it is today. It will charge a price that will be reflective of its cost, right? And then because ECG becomes like it's like a national asset and all that, that is why ECG is where it is. But it is not run. ECG is not run basis on, I mean, solely on market conditions. No. So Kofi, I hope that makes sense to you. ECG is not run solely based on market conditions. It's run based on the economy and all that. Government has control over it, and therefore government does not allow ECG to increase prices the way it wants to. Right. So that is why you see the case for ECG. But if it's purely competitive market, then ECG will not sit down and make losses. They will charge higher than what they are charging. Okay. All right. So let me get back to the slides and see what has not been covered. Okay. So this is the equilibrium conditions that I've mentioned. I've done this with you and all that. So yeah, so for the competitive firm, as you know, price is equal to marginal revenue equal to marginal cost. But for the monopolies, the price is greater than marginal revenue, and the marginal revenue should be equal to marginal cost. That will be the equilibrium condition. So these are the profits, right? So this is the case where the monopolist is making a profit. Okay, so the monopolist will receive economic profit as long as price is greater than the average total cost. Now I want to skip all this. The market for drugs is an example. So we can skip all that. We can also skip the welfare cost of the monopoly, the deadweight loss, we can skip all that. And then the issue about the inefficiencies of the monopoly as well, I can also skip that, right? And then the policies towards monopoly. I mean, if you don't want firms to, or a particular firm to become a monopoly in an industry and all that, there are public policies towards that, particularly in the US, but in Ghana, but there are public policies that are there to prevent firms becoming monopolies and all that. So you can read on all this as well. Okay, so all these things I will skip them. And then I think there's more time. I can do monopolistic competition so that in our next meeting, I'll pick questions and solve them with you, right? So let's quickly look at monopolistic competition. Okay, so that is also straightforward. So if you remember in our discussions on the market structures, what they were when I was explaining them, I said monopolistic competition is a market structure that has some characteristics of perfect competition and some characteristics of a monopoly. So in a monopolistic competitive market, um, or let me say monopolistic competitive market is more of the markets that you see. Most of the industries that we see around us are more of monopolistic competitive. The firm has control over the price. The products are differentiated. So in other words, you can distinguish between the product of the firm or the product of firm A from the product of firm B. You can do those distinguish. You can see that, right? So this is the so relatively large number of firms, products are differentiated, firms compete on price, they compete on product quality, and they also engage in advertising and marketing. There is free entry and exit as well. So I would okay, so this is you can just read these are the same thing. So I think what is important is for us to look at the profit maximizing condition. So the products are differentiated. It means that they are different. You can tell the difference between the product of one firm and the product of another firm. But they are close substitutes, although not perfect substitutes. So if you don't have the product of firm A, you can use a product of firm B to do that. Okay. So this is still the same thing. Just these are all things that you can read on your own. So the demand curve is going to be downward sloping because the firm has control over the price of the items that it sells. So there's advertising that can take place and all that. There's also free entry and exit in the industry. Okay, so now let's go to the output decision. So this is where I want to switch to the whiteboard to explain the output decision for you. So for the monopolistic competitive firm, it has this in terms of the relationship between price and marginal revenue, it's the same as the monopolist. So for the monopolistic competitive firm, price is greater than marginal revenue. For a monopolistic competitive firm, price is greater than marginal revenue, right? And therefore, for a monopolistic competitive firm, the demand curve is downward sloping, just like the monopolies, right? And then the marginal revenue lies below it, just like the monopolies. So this is just the same as the monopolies because they also have control over price. So it's just the same as the monopolies. So the demand curve is downward sloping, marginal revenue curve is also downward sloping. Marginal revenue is lower than the price, or the average revenue is equal to marginal revenue, and they are greater than the price of average revenue is equal to price and is greater than the marginal revenue for the firm. Okay, so what the profit maximizing output is just similar to the monopolies. So is it the same thing? So you have your demand curve here, and then you have your marginal revenue curve here. So they also have their marginal cost curves, right? And then the equilibrium condition is where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. The same thing. Marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. And therefore, you look for that point. This is it. And you trace it up. And then this will give you the price. Right? That will give you the price. Okay. So this is the equilibrium condition. Right? But for a competitive firm or monopolistic competitive firm, it can make abnormal profit, a normal profit, or a loss in the short run. So that's another differences. I mean, another one difference between the monopoly and the monopolistic competition. Although they have the same diagram, you see the demand curve is downward sloping, marginal revenue lies below it, and all that. But for a monopolistic competitive industry, a firm can make abnormal profit. It can make normal profit, or it can make a loss in the short run. Right? So that is another characteristic that I want you to know. So let's show the case where it is making abnormal profit. And I'll show the case where it is making a normal profit and the case where it is making a loss. So you draw the demand curve and then you have their marginal revenue curve. So you draw your MC line. So now I want to impose my ATC. Now what do we see? We see that this is where marginal revenue will be equal to marginal cost. So we trace it down. So this is the quantity that is monopolistic competitive firm would sell. To determine the price, trace it to touch the demand curve. So this will be the price. And then to determine the average total cost. This is the average total cost. So what do we see? We see that price is greater than the average total cost. So this firm is making abnormal profit or positive economic profit. So this is abnormal. So that's abnormal. And then let's look at the normal. So you draw it. So this is the demand and this is the marginal revenue. So you draw your marginal cost curve. So I want to draw it to be normal. So that one, I need to look for the profit maximizing output here. So that's where they are equal. and then you draw your curve such that you pass through that. So this is your ATC. So this is where the price, so you see that that price is equal to ATC. So this is normal profit. So price is equal to ATC, right? And then the last one where it is making a loss. So this is the demand curve again, and this is your marginal revenue curve. So you look for where this is the MC. So I place the ATC up. So this is the ATC, right? So you look for where MR equal to MC. So is this side, and then to obtain the price is that one, right? So this is price, and then to obtain the ATC is up, and this is the ATC. So what do we see? We see that price is less than the average total cost, right? Okay, so this is the short run equilibrium. Now, just as in the perfect competition, where these firms will move to a long run equilibrium. So perfect competition to, a monopolistic competition to have a long run equilibrium. So that's why I'm saying that monopolistic competition has some characteristics of monopoly and then some characteristics of perfect competition. So they also have a long run equilibrium, and the long run equilibrium is this one. So in the long run, all firms will make normal profit, right? So all firms will make normal profit in the long run. Okay. All firms will make normal profit in the long run. All right. Now, there is one key thing about monopolistic competition that stands out, which is they always produce with excess capacity. Right. Now, let me explain that further. Monopolistic competitive firms produce with excess capacity. They produce with excess capacity, right? And why do we say that? Now, let me show that on a diagram. In other words, they say they are not efficient in production. And we can show that on a diagram. So let me show the case that this firm is making profit. It's making profit. So this is the average total cost, right? So you look for where MR equal to MC, and it's here. So you trace it up. So this is the price, and this is the average total cost. Okay. Now, it is believed that they produce with excess capacity. What it means is that their equilibrium point can never be at the minimum of the average total cost. Right? So it means that wherever they produce is not an efficient point. So this is the excess capacity that they have. They always produce under capacity. So it means that they can never produce at the minimum, or equilibrium will not happen at the minimum of the average total cost. And I'm sure you can see why that is even the case. By the nature of the marginal revenue curve, as long as it's downward sloping, equilibrium can never happen at the minimum of the ATC. So they are said to be producing with excess capacity. So compared to perfect competition. Perfect competition is more efficient than monopolistic competition, because perfect competition, in the long run, it happens at the minimum. The long run equilibrium happens at the minimum of the average total cost. So in the case of perfect competition, there is no excess capacity in the long run. But in the case of monopolistic competition, they always produce with excess capacity. So then, for it is believed that in terms of efficiency, it's not an efficient market compared to perfect competition. But some have also argued that although firms in this industry produce with excess capacity, they offer us something, which is variety. So they offer variety, right, to consumers. For instance, if I want to eat now, if I want to buy food, now I look at the fast food industry. There's variety for me. And it's even believed that variety is the spice of life, isn't it? So there's variety for me. I can either buy papaya, I can buy KFC, I can buy all that. So we should value, or the if we are to place value on the fact that they give us variety, it might even override the cost of the excess capacity. So therefore, there are markets that are needed. Okay. So please take note of that, the excess capacity thing, that the monopolistic competitive firms produce with excess capacity. And the reason is the fact that the equilibrium can never occur at the minimum of the average total cost. And that although they produce with excess capacity, they offer variety. And for that reason, it's an advantage of having a monopolistic competitive firm. So a disadvantage is that it produces with excess capacity. An advantage is that they offer variety, right? And that is something that people place more value on than just the excess capacity thing. Okay, good. So let me see. I think I've covered all that. So the profit maximizing decision, yeah, the diagrams are there to explain it to you. So they might be making a loss. So that is also there. I've drawn this diagram to you as well. But in the long run, they all make economic profit. And that too, you have that there. The diagram is there. So we compare monopolistic competition and perfect competition. So that is the excess capacity argument that I made. And also we have the price greater than the marginal cost in the case of monopolistic competition, but not the case of perfect competition. So the excess capacity argument is there. So they don't produce at a minimum and all that. So that is basically the whole thing. So the slides are a lot, but it's the same thing that you're looking at. So you can forget about the dead weight loss again, and that is all right. That is great. Okay, so that is great. So in our next meeting, which is on Friday, right? I think it's on Friday. I will take a question on perfect competition and then a question on monopoly. Then we just do the others. Question of consumer behavior and all that. Please go through the past questions. You can find them, right? But I'll prepare some questions that we'll just go through, and then as a final wrap up, for like a TA doing that. So any question on this? Any question? Okay, so if you don't have any question, then I think we will end here, and then I'll see you on. Somebody wants to see my face. Don't worry, I'll show my face on the last day of class. But you can always find my face online. If you want to find my face, just type my name, Wasiu Abdurrahman. You see my face online. right? Okay. Somebody's asking which areas you study all topics. All topics are likely examinable questions. So there are no specific areas for you. You have to study everything for the exams. Okay. So have a good afternoon. Oh, it's still morning. It's still morning, right? So have a good morning and let's meet on Friday, I think, for the final wrap up, right? For the final wrap up of the semester's work. Bye bye.